Te namaha pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. And reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is, what is superimposition? It's not the kind of a question that you would ask your neighbor. In common parlance, it just means, well, in Photoshop, you used to be able to cut and copy the face of one person and paste it on the face of another person, just for humorous effect. And you can imagine taking an image of a triangle and putting it on top of the image of an inverted triangle. And we could say that they're superimposed one upon the other. In the Vedanta philosophy of non-dualism, this word is a term of art. That is, it's used in a specific and technical way. And it just means, well, we could say it means to seeing something where it is not. Seeing the unreal, mistaking the unreal for the real, or mixing up the real and the unreal. Now, I'll give you a couple here. Famous, now, as you know, in Vedanta philosophy, analogical reasoning is considered to be a valid method of knowledge. It's not in Western logic. That's because we're talking about something which is super conscious and beyond relative language. But just imagine, a man is out walking one day on the beach, and maybe he's looking for some interesting piece of driftwood or a pretty colored stone, and the sun is shining overhead, and it's glistening on the water, the waves are crashing in. And he looks over down the beach and he sees a gleam of light in the sand. And immediately he thinks, something might be buried there. And seeing that light, it looks like a reflection, maybe of a silver coin. Maybe somebody's dropped that coin there. In fact, there may be several, just all there in a little pile in the sand. And so he headed over towards that place. But when he finally got there, he looked down. He just kind of, what was there? Well, he saw that it was just a piece of shell. It's called a mother of pearl, means like an oyster shell or an abalone shell that has an iridescent lining to it that easily catches the light. How foolish he was. Well, he mistook that gleam of light with his hopes and dreams. He was disappointed. He had superimposed the silver coin on the seashell. Now let me give you another example, which is maybe the most famous example in Indian philosophy. And we have to call these analogies. These are not really stories. But they're analogies that make a point. A man one day was returning from his work in the fields on the road back to his village. And it was twilight time. That was the meeting between the day and the night. It was getting dark. And as he walked along, he was thinking about getting home, and he looked over. He saw over by the side of the road. It caught his eye what he thought was a snake. It was just lying there. It was all curled up. He could just imagine it was hissing, crawling towards him, and he just cried out in fear and in shock. And he was very frightened. And it makes sense. Because when you're in India, when you talk about snakes, they don't talk about gopher snakes and about garter snakes like we do here. When they talk about a snake, they mean like maybe a viper, a cobra. So a cobra can bite you and can kill you. Thinking in this way, he was very frightened, and he ran down the road. And he was shaking and he was trembling. And as he came down the road, he passed by another traveler who accosted him and said, "Sir, please stop here. What's the problem? You seem to be very upset. You're all agitated. What's wrong? What did you see?" He says, "Oh, back there." He says, "I saw there's a very dangerous snake by the side of the road. I want to warn people about it." That man looked at him. He said, "You mean just back there a little ways?" He says, "Well, I passed that. That was just a rope." And I said, "Oh, no, you're wrong. That was a snake. I saw it very clearly." "Oh, is that so? Well, why don't we go back and take a look?" Now, this traveler so happened he had a lantern with him. Carrying that lantern, he could see very well as they turned. They went back along the road, and they came up to that place. He walked over there, held up that lantern. "You see? Look here." He took a stick and he moved it around there. "You see, it's just a rope. Look at this." The man with trepidation, he went over and he looked. He couldn't believe it. He said, "Yeah, it's just a rope. I can't, it's just a rope. You're right." He was so relieved. And he smiled. They both smiled. And they began to laugh at that foolish mistake. Now that's the analogy that has occupied philosophers for thousands of years. And you may say, well, what's the big deal? It's just a common error, mistaking one thing for another. It's a cognitive error that's very well known to everybody. Certainly if you don't know anything about psychology, see, but this is not about psychology. This is about philosophy. And philosophy is about metaphysics. And metaphysics is about reality. And that's what this Vedanta philosophy, it's all about reality. And the fundamental teaching of the Vedanta is that there are levels of reality. The first level of reality, the highest reality, is the absolute. There is an absolute reality. There's an absolute truth which transcends this relative world and which supervenes over everything that we know and consider to be real. That's one level. I'm going to do this all in good old-fashioned Anglo-Saxon English. I'm not going to give you all these Sanskrit words. Second level of reality. Maybe I'll use a few. In a sense, in the second level of reality, just imagine what we're saying. The thesis here is that there are levels of reality. The second level of reality, which we could call a conventional reality. That's the everyday walking around meaning of what we call the real world, the world of our sense perception, the relative world, the pluralistic world of objects and people and things. That would be the second level of reality. Then there's a third level of reality. That is, we're considering the ontology of being. That's why this is like philosophy. And ontology means the study of the nature of being and reality. The third level of being is just imagination. That is, we see things in a dream. We think that they're real. But later on waking, we know that they're unreal. They were just, we know, yes, it was just an appearance. It was just our own mind, our imagination, fantasizing. You know, when we dream, the conscious, logical, rational, intelligent aspect of our mind is occluded. So we don't have any rational faculty. It's a wild play of the imagination. So like that, we have three different conceptions of what is the true nature of things. There are three levels of truth. There is the truth, there is the lower truth, and there is a higher truth. See, these are all fundamental principles. The lower truth is transcended by the higher truth. And there's a higher truth beyond that, that is the absolute, which transcends all three. So there's lower, and there's medium, and there is the higher truth. Now let's see if you think here about in the days of and we're thinking back to the biography of Sri Ramakrishna. You remember how, just to illustrate this, it was in Kashipur Garden House, and he was lying there in his sick bed. He's near a Mahasamadhi, being attended by the devotees, his disciples around him. And we could say that at that time he looked around him and he said, looking at the disciples, these young boys who were attending on him in his last days, he said, I see them all as if they're pillowcases. And it is Satchidananda, that is, it's God, who is appearing as all of these young persons around me. The difference between the relative world and the absolute world. The relative world, we assume that everything is real, but the enlightened person sees that it is not absolutely real, that it is God appearing as what we see. And so what's the point of the analogy? What's the point of the rope and the snake? The man saw the snake. He did not see the rope. What's the point? The point is that this world that we see is mithya. That means it's unreal. That means it's less than absolutely real. It doesn't mean that it's imaginary. It doesn't mean that it's absolutely false. It means that it's only relatively real. And we take that relative reality for the absolute reality. And thus it is that we live our lives under the influence of an ontological illusion. It seems far-fetched that one thing would appear as another. Now, what's the cause? We could say, this is how the way the Vedanta philosophers are analyzing this. There are saints and sages who have realized God and have realized a higher reality, which we can't even imagine. Just if you're a student of the Greek philosopher Plato, he visualizes as an entire world which transcends this world, a real world. The world of our apperception is relatively unreal. We're living, as it were, like the men chained in the cave, in the allegory of the cave. Similarly, in Vedanta, saints and sages have realized this higher truth. Why don't we all see that? Why don't we see reality? Why? And the answer is that we are subject to a kind of a metaphysical, I could call it a metaphysical amnesia, a forgetfulness. In Sanskrit, it's called avidya. That means ignorance. That is, we are living in ignorance. It doesn't mean that you don't know a lot of things. It doesn't mean you may have a PhD from the university, and you may have all kinds of merit badges of knowledge, and yet the saints and sages maintain that no, we're missing something. We're missing the most fundamental thing, the most basic reality, and that's due to ignorance. Ignorance just means, what is ignorance? Well, that's a big question. It doesn't exist. It's like ignorance is like darkness. It doesn't really exist. It's just the absence of light. Well, where does it come from? What does it mean? When we say ignorance, it means is that we're living in some kind of darkness, like in the story of the rope and the snake. It's twilight. He didn't see very well. He didn't have much light. That's our problem. We don't have light. And so we're failing to see things as they really are. We're living in darkness. We're seeing through a glass darkly. And we're kind of in a lower state. The higher state is the state of waking. The lower state is when you become more drowsy and you get sleepy and you're about to fall into sleep. That's what we feel. We begin to feel the influence of the guna of tamas, and we're falling into sleep and we begin to dream. And that's why in the philosophy of non-dualism, God is sometimes referred to as the great cosmic dreamer. A vision, imagine the infinite being lying there on an ocean, a vast ocean of milk. There he is asleep, dreams God. He's lulled by the movement of the waters. And so this world is like a dream. We're like the figures in the dream world of God. We're like altars in a vast consciousness. In Vedanta also it compares God to a magician. And just as a magician has a cosmic power, it's called Maya, and it's through this cosmic power that he conjures up this whole world of our experience. This power of Maya, it has two aspects. One is it's a veiling aspect. Veiling, that means you're ignorant, you're falling asleep. There's like a dark veil being placed before our awareness. Second power is the power of projection. It projects this whole world. this relative world that we see all around us, of people and things. And so we take it to be real. And this is the projecting power of God. So the veiling and the projecting power. We live subject to that cosmic Maya. We're subject to the power of Maya. But God has also given us free will. That is, yes, we have, the veil has been drawn, we have ignorance, and we're captivated and mesmerized by the appearance. But we also have the power to choose between what is right and what's wrong, what's true and what's false. And thus, we could choose to gradually remove ignorance by knowledge. That is, we have to come to understand what is the nature of our predicament. Through the use of viveka, that means discrimination, through spiritual reasoning, we can come to remove our false beliefs about the nature of reality and come to understand this doctrine of the different levels of reality and begin to think more along those lines. It's a change, a radical change in our worldview, is what it is. This Vedanta philosophy is not interested in just giving us an improved worldview. They're going to give us a whole complete transformation of a worldview. According to Vedanta philosophy, this world is like a mirage. You remember how in the life of Swami Vedarupananda, he actually is, in his reminiscences there, as he described, he's during his days of the wandering monk. He was in the state of Rajputana, where there are the large part of that is desert. And he was walking there all alone. And he was walking along, and he looked over there, and he saw a beautiful lake. And there he saw some trees around the lake, and he began to think to himself, I wonder why do they call this desert country? You know, there's a beautiful lake over there, and there's some trees. And then it dawned on him, wait a minute, this is the mirage that I've been reading about and hearing about all my life. And it's not really a lake. That is, it's just the appearance of the water. And then now he knew, and what's the difference? What's the difference between a man who doesn't know this and the man who does know this? Well, the man who, the ordinary person who walks along, he sees that water and he thinks, oh, yes, now I can quench my thirst. He sees the trees and he thinks, yes, now I can get a little shade. And he's so excited and he goes over, and what he realizes? What does he realize? That the water, it appeared, but the water can't quench his thirst, and the trees can't give him any cooling shade. He realizes that what he is seeing is an appearance. That's the realization. That's called enlightenment. Enlightenment means that somehow we realize something about reality. Notice how in this analogy, when the guy sees the rope, the snake disappears from his mind. In this analogy, how we see is different. The mirage doesn't disappear. Goes out, walking along, he still sees the water and the trees. But now he knows. The enlightened person knows something that we don't know. I think about the kind of paintings you've seen of yours in artwork. You know, there's a kind of an art called photorealism. It's called, sometimes it's called hyperrealism. And sometimes in magic it's called trompe-l'oeil. That means they can paint a picture. You can see a picture maybe of a doorway and of a window, and you just want to go and look out that window. You don't realize that it's just the work of the artist. It's so realistic that you can't tell the difference. It fools your eye. You can't believe that that's not a real window. And so similarly is the contention, of this Advaita Vedanta, that is this philosophy of mundane dualism. That's the fundamental contention, that this world is like a mirage. And it's not absolutely real. Now, let's look here at these analogies. So far, we've been using the analogy for like observing the world around us. We view it from that's the vantage point. We've been looking from within to what is without. And we're kind of analyzing this, what it seems to be, philosophers maintain, is a cognitive error in our perception, or not in our perception, but in our understanding, in our knowledge. But it's all about the nature of the world in front. Now we're going to turn our attention to a different aspect of this analogy, or this teaching, and that is we're going to turn around the telescope, and instead of looking outside, we're going to look inside. We turn this is a problem in our life. We're trying to live our lives by looking through both ends of the telescope. Sometimes it's one and sometimes another. We get the two all mixed up. So now we're turning the telescope, we're turning it within. And we're going to look within ourselves at our inner reality. We're still talking about reality. We're talking about levels of reality. But now we're going to talk here about inner reality, and particularly about reality of ourself. That's what we're interested in. We want to know the truth about ourself. What's the correspondence? The rope. With the rope outside, that's reality. But within also, there is a truth, a deeper truth. And that is ourself. That's the Atman, our true nature. Now looking within and using Vedanta discrimination, that is analysis, the Indian philosophers are very clear about defining at the very outset. It's the first question that's really answered in this philosophy, is the first question of philosophy, and that is, who am I? And so that's the first question that's addressed and is answered by these students of Vedanta. It's about the nature of yourself. And it says, well, in your nature of yourself, according to the saints and sages, according to the teachings of the Upanishads and the scriptures, it's very simple. We can discriminate ourself from nature. Now, we're not talking now about external nature. We're looking within ourselves, or inner nature. It's very clear for us to discriminate ourselves from our inner nature. That is our body and our thoughts and our feelings. Because we can see clearly that our true self is a subject, and everything we know about our body and mind is that of an object. Ourself That is, I am a conscious being. And yet everything that I know and am aware of within the microcosm now, we're looking within us, studying the microcosm, is an object. So we have a subject, an object, conscious, unconscious. I'm conscious. And yet the body itself, although it seems like the whole body is conscious. But in the nature, the natural elements are inert. So too, as we begin to do that analysis, we see that everything that we can know about ourselves is undergoing change. It's mutable. It's in a constant process of flux. It's in process. Everything is in process. But I'm not in process. That is the observer, the witness. If I look deep within myself, yeah, I've changed. My body and mind and thoughts and feelings have changed, but really I'm the same person. So it's radically different. And so there's the unchanging object. And what do we call something which is always changing and it appears to be one way and then it disappears? Well, we call that unreal. That's what we would call, certainly it's not our highest level of absolute reality, which is unchanging. It's not absolutely real. And what we see in our body and mind, we would say, okay, it's relatively real, we'll say. Our body is not an imagination. It's not like a dream. And yet, it might as well be a dream because we don't know the higher reality. So it's all relative. And so what's the conclusion? The conclusion is that this is the analysis of the Vedantins, that, well, it's very clear. Who are you? You're the conscious subject, which is unchanging and which is real. And the body and mind are the object which is changing and unreal. It is impossible for us to mix these up. That means it's logically impossible to mix these up. And that's the stunning thing. If it's impossible, then what about our present experience? If what you say is true, what about our present experience? Well, if you can imagine that there is a red-hot iron ball. And maybe I visualize this. Maybe it's on a long chain of a large crane that's wrecking it's like a wrecking ball. They're demolishing a building, and this ball is swinging. But imagine that it's been heated in a fire for hours and hours, and it's become hotter and hotter until it's become red hot. Now you can say, as we look at that ball, we can see that, yes, it's red. But now wait a minute. Iron is black. How can it possibly be red? And it's very hot. Yes, it's hot, but we know that just a lump of iron is very cold. How could it be hot and cold at the same time? And, well, we know that fire is just a plasma, or iron is an element. These are two completely different substances. How can one be identified with another? One is light, it has no weight. One is shape-shifting, like the fire. The other doesn't move, is immovable, like the molecule of the iron. And so like this, the two things, here we have an example given to us by Shankaracharya of the, in fact, it's impossible to confuse the absolute and the relative. Here's an example. And this is what we do. Why? Because we don't have discrimination. We can't see the difference between the redness of the fire and the substance of the iron of the wrecking ball. We can't see the difference. We can't make a distinction. And so the two are kind of confused in our mind. Similarly, it is when we look within us. We begin to do analysis of ourselves. We know that we have a gross body. We have a subtle body. We have a causal body. One is superimposed on the other. They're like the Russian dolls, the Russian Matryoshka dolls, one inside the other. Big doll inside, another little smaller one, like layers of an onion. Go deeper, we get into the subtle level, the causal level. Those levels also are divided into the 5 sheaths. Our gross physical flesh and blood body, that's the first candidate for who am I. But if we look deeper, yeah, we can see, well, I'm not the flesh and blood body. It's just a vehicle for the person. I'm the person. That is, I have an interior. And so like that we go, from the body to our vital pranas, our energy body, with which we're often identified. You have any aches and pains? What do you think? You think, oh, I'm not feeling very well today. Well, that's your energy body. That's your pranamaya kosha. Some inflammation, some blockage. But that's not you yourself. You're the observer. And as we go deeper, we find we have an energy body, then we have our lower mind. That is our ordinary mind, which is the subject of the ego. That's our ordinary mind. But we also have a higher mind, that is our rational thinking, discriminating mind. That's our higher level. We're going deeper and deeper, doing an analysis of what is reality. That's our question. Who am I? What is my true nature? Now we're looking within. We're not looking at the world outside. We're looking at the world in the interior. And so we come deeper and deeper. We go to the bliss sheath, get into a deep meditation, and there you think, oh, I am an infinite blissful being. Well, that's just a level of your understanding. The deepest level, of course, is your true self. That is, once you have discriminated all of these 5 levels in these 3 bodies, and you have an understanding, then you realize that there is what's left. That's me. What's left is my awareness, disencumbered of all this stuff. Now, I'm free. That's just a necessary, it seems to be to philosophers just a necessary truth. It's an a priori experience. And that's the goal of our spiritual life, is to attain enlightenment. That means to experience and to realize our true nature. And Vedanta discusses it in terms of the Brahma Vidya. That is the analysis of the world outside, soul, God, and religion, and then the analysis of the Atma Vidya, of the analysis within us. So this would be the highest level. Depending on how you look at it, you could call it the deeper level. But if you've seen that picture of the yogi, maybe in some book you've seen a picture of a yogi who's meditating, and there's the concentric circles around kind of different levels of reality. And if you look down and you bisect those circular lines, you see that if you follow the line of the lower, it goes up into the higher. The lower is the higher. And so it's all relative. So that's our purpose. Our purpose is to realize our true nature. To do that, though, we have to recognize the superimposition, recognize it, and somehow begin to see through it. We have to work our way through it. And that's going to require that we have some help. Now, once upon a time, in ancient India, there was a flock of sheep that were grazing in the grass in the foothills of the Himalayas. And the sun is shining and the birds were singing, and those sheep were so happy. Little noses nuzzled down in that warm, wet grass, just eating and eating. They failed to notice that there was a big mama lion who was stalking that flock of sheep. And she circled around at a distance and got into a position that was downwind of the sheep and climbed up on a little hillock. And there she looked over, saw the whole flock. And she gathered her energies together, and with one act of will, she sprang upon the flock. But it so happened that, well, she was pregnant at that time. And she fell to the ground. And the shock of that fall, a little baby lion was born. And he came into the world, and he didn't know anything. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know who he was. And so he wandered around, mystified, confused, until he saw those sheep over there in the field. They didn't even know what had happened. He wandered over there, and they looked at him, he looked at them, and they thought, well, maybe he's just another guy. And so he was welcomed into the flock of sheep, and he began to live there. And time passed. But, he was never really happy. Because for one thing, the other sheep didn't really accept him. Sometimes they ridiculed his appearance. He had this big bushy mane and sharp teeth. And then too, they would criticize the way he talked. They would say, bah, bah. The best that he could do was graw. That's the best he could do. Well, and not only that, he never really enjoyed his dinner. He used to have the green grass, and he had red grass, and all kinds of selected grasses. Never really was to his taste. But he didn't say anything. Time passed. And one day as the flock was grazing, they failed to notice that a big daddy lion was stalking that flock. He moved around, all around, came to the little hillock, came up on the hill, looked down, saw the sheep, gathered up all of his energy and power within himself. But then, wait a minute, he did a double take, because he saw in the midst of the sheep, there was a huge lion. He couldn't believe it. He was stunned and amazed. And so he got back and he sprang upon that flock of sheep, and they all scattered everywhere running. And he came right to that sheep lion, grabbed him with one huge paw, held his head to the ground. Please don't hurt me, said the sheep lion. He's like, the daddy lion's like, who are you? What are you doing here? And the little sheep lion said, well, what am I doing? I'm a little sheep. Please don't. I said, come with me. Dragged him away. Come along let me show you something. Dragged him along to a big pond of crystal clear water. It just settled there like a mirror. And so they began. He says, he comes over there. Look at you. Let's look at ourselves here in this pond. He looked there. He said, here's you and here's me. And little sheep looked there. Yeah. We looked the same. And for the first time, he began to feel good about the way he looked. And then the daddy lion says, well, looks like you need to have something good to eat. Went in the bushes there, pulled out a big chunk of bloody red meat. pushed it in front of him. Here, he said, here, eat this. He said, no, I'm a vegetarian. I can't eat that. Pushed his head down. He began to eat that. Ah, yes, he began to enjoy it. First time he had enjoyed his dinner. And the daddy lion took him. He said, look, why don't you come along with me? What do you stand there? Let me hear you roar. The little baby lion goes, he go, graw, graw. No. And then the daddy lion roared. And soon that little lion was roaring like a real lion. And so, together, they went off and they lived as kings of the forest. And so it's a teaching story about ourselves. That's our condition. We're like that sheep lion. Have all kinds of superimposed ideas about who we are, what is our nature, what is the truth about ourselves, beliefs about ourselves. And what we need to do is in the language of the Vedanta philosophers, we need to de-hypnotize ourselves. That's the process of superimposition. There's a long word. That's like dehypnotize. That means work through the analysis, come to a deeper understanding and experience so that we can decondition ourselves from our false beliefs and recondition ourselves in alignment with the truths. And that's what spiritual practice is all about. It's just about aligning ourselves with our true nature. You don't have to become the Atman. You don't have to become an infinite, divine, immortal being. That's what you already are. But we do need to align the mirror of the mind with the truth about ourselves. We have to penetrate through the layers, the different levels of misapprehension and misconception and false beliefs. And if we can do that, then we will realize our true nature, and we will realize the nature of ultimate reality, which is the goal and purpose of our spiritual life.
Endless springs in the cave of my heart, where shines your light through all of the darkness. Your waters wash my face from the tears that do fall, and fill my heart with your grace. Ocean of bliss over all, ocean of bliss over all. You are the faces we see in all the places that be. You are the sounds that we hear through all the forms that appear. You are the day and the night, the power that fills us up with sight, the mystery of life and of death, the wind that moves every breath. You are without and within, my precious Lord and my friend, the Mother creating us all, both the great and the small. Brahman is all and is one, Atman and Brahman are one. Within the cave of my heart, Atman and Brahman heart, where shines your light through all of the darkness. Your waters wash my face from the tears that do fall. Fill my heart with your grace, ocean of bliss over all, ocean of bliss over all, ocean of bliss over all.
Next Wednesday, there will be a reading on Swami Ramakrishnananda. Saturday is the celebration of Durga Puja, and there will be no Bhagavad Gita class on Saturday. On Sunday, Swami Sarvadevananda will speak, and the subject is Maya, Yoga Maya, and Maha Maya. Good title. Okay? Om Dyo Shantihi, Antariksha Ham Shantihi, Prithivi Shantihi, Apa Shantihi, O Shadaya Shantihi, Vanaspataya Shantihi, Vishwe Deva Shantihi, Brahma Shantihi, Sarvam Shantihi, Shantireva Shantihi, Same Shantiredhi, Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.